Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Mike Fieros, and I'll be your host for this podcast, Cyber Tech Podcast, inside the minds of everyday IT and cybersecurity professionals. And one of the reasons why I wanted to make this podcast, I've been getting messages from left and right, either social media or personally to my phone, just different individuals asking, how do I get into IT or cybersecurity? What kind of certifications do I need to get into cybersecurity or IT? What kind of work experience do I need to have for certain positions and whatnot? And so all these questions, and which are really good questions, I wanted to explain this on a platform like this, whether you're hearing it on Spotify, whether you're hearing this on podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to this, maybe on a streaming platform. I wanted to make this podcast for anybody, really, for anybody that wants to work in IT or cybersecurity, those that may be already in the profession, and those just curious about technology and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to create this podcast, interviewing everyday IT and cybersecurity professionals. We'll have professionals on here for various entry levels, various experiences, both in IT and cybersecurity. And I'm really looking forward to this. I think this is something that's really, really much needed. For example, I just recently, at this time of this recording, about 2 days ago, today's a Saturday, this past Thursday, I was invited to talk to high school students. Shout out to Moises for the organization he works for, and also shout out to Maddie from AZ Cyber Initiative. They came together, partnered up together to do a cyber boot camp. There's cyber boot camps in the state of Arizona, various locations. This particular one I spoke to was at the Arizona Western College I think it's called Entrepreneur Center off of Redondo Drive here in Yuma, but I think they may have changed it. Anyway, I spoke to high school students for about 40 minutes or so, kind of explaining my background. Man, these students, they're various ranges. They're high school students, so from freshman all the way to senior in high school. These students are really, really encouraging, hearing them asking questions about, being in IT and cybersecurity, how do you get into the professions and whatnot. And so talking to those students and telling my work history and a little bit about me, how I got into IT and cybersecurity, just gave me encouragement and just confirmed that, this podcast is really much needed. Like I said before, this podcast is for people who are curious to get into the profession and just want a kind of a guide. Those already in the professions for years experience, and those interested in tech. And so I'm really excited for this podcast. I think this podcast is really, really much needed. Really looking forward to this. A little bit about me too, guys. So I was born and raised here in Yuma, Arizona. Grew up with my grandfather after 25 years working in agriculture fields, picking lettuce. He became a foreman, picking lettuce, crops, you name it. I think also cotton here in Yuma, also Imperial Valley, which is Yuma's pressed up against the Arizona, California border, also Mexico to the south of us. So we're in kind of this corner pocket region of Arizona, California. And so my grandfather worked 25 years, ever since he was actually a little kid. So maybe 25, 30-ish years or so. At one point in his early 30s, he decided that, hey, I can't do this anymore. This is a lot of work. By the time he gets older, he was already kind of thinking the future, how not only his age, but his health. So one thing that really struck his curiosity is electronics. Back then, you're talking about late 40s, early 50s or so. There really wasn't a lot of electronic technicians here, particularly in Yuma. Yuma is a rural community. It's bigger now, but back then it was really small. Agriculture, was a big industry back then as it is now. So he kind of pivoted careers. He went into electronics, got his certification and RCA certification as a repair technician. Worked on radios, TVs, eventually VCRs when they came out. You name it. My grandpa was working on stuff. He got a job at one of the electronic repair shops here in the 50s back then in Yuma. If anybody was familiar with this area, imagine back then it was really small. So my dad, when he was born, kind of grew up watching my grandpa do that, watching my grandpa, talk to people, fix electronics. By the time my dad went to high school, graduated from Yuma High and went to Arizona Western College, he got his degree in electronics. And so he kind of followed suit, went into electronics. my dad ended up gaining actually a full-time job at Arizona Western College as a print shop supervisor. And so he was there for 40 plus years. But on the side, he continued to work on electronics like my grandpa did, so much so that my dad went into computers actually and started to work on Macintosh computers. Apple Macintosh coming out in the early 80s really struck my dad's interest and started working on actually Apple computers. So back then, coming into the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s, very few folks here in Yuma worked on Apple computers. I grew up in that kind of environment, watching them. Growing up, there was my grandpa's working, on electronics. My dad was fixing Apple computers back then, and whatnot. And so I grew up in that kind of environment. Also, my dad had friends who were working in radio, TV, and whatnot. Hence why I'm making this podcast and stuff. So me growing up, I didn't really want to go into that. So I kind of decided, hey, I want to do radio broadcasting. So worked at KWC for years, was part of different media teams and stuff like that. I was also a mobile DJ, DJed all types of music. My preferred genre was hip hop. So I DJed at house parties, weddings, quinceañeras, you name it, locally here in Yuma. DJ with my cousin, DJ with a good friend of mine as well. Planning to get married. I worked in TV doing match control here in Yuma, and then I went into law enforcement to make more money. And so I was in law enforcement security. When I worked at the local sheriff's office here in Yuma, and then one day I just thought, you know what, I don't feel like doing this anymore. I really want to get into IT, and so started working in IT. Worked various positions, got promoted to computer tech, worked at different organizations and stuff like that. So worked on Apple computers, Windows computers, some Linux stuff, some networking stuff, and so all the way to now. Now I'm working remotely. I work for an MSP called Glomac IT, and so I thank my grandfather and my dad, getting into this. And so would love to have this podcast to inspire people. Those, no matter what age you are you interested in getting into information technology and cybersecurity? And hope this podcast inspires you. I hope this podcast informs you, guides you, any way, shape, and form. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can search me on there, and then hit me up on there with any questions. Like I said before, we'll have guests on here into these professions, and I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks, guys, for listening to this introduction episode. I hope you guys are having a great day wherever you're at, whenever you listen to this. And the next episodes, I can't wait for this. Like I said, thank you again for your support. Feel free to share this podcast with anybody you know. And it's going to be fun, guys. Thanks again. And again, this is the Cyber Tech Podcast, inside the minds of everyday IT and cybersecurity professionals. Thank you, guys. Hey, everyone. How's it going? My name is Mike Fierro.